My name is Nora Bennett. I'm 29, and that night was supposed to be special. Our family dinner, the one Mom called a celebration of blessings. She'd sent emails, reminders, color-coded spreadsheets for side dishes. She'd even assigned each of us a topic to share. One accomplishment, one gratitude. I showed up wearing the beige cardigan she said made me presentable. I'd curled my hair, even though it never holds a curl. The house smelled like pine candles and pot roast. Everything was perfectly staged, the kind of evening that could have been a Hallmark movie if it weren't my life. Somewhere between the mashed potatoes and the green beans, I decided to tell the truth. I said I was pregnant. I thought maybe Mom would freeze for a second and then melt. Maybe she'd say something gentle, or at least awkward and hopeful. Instead, her face turned to stone, like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life, the moment I'd finally confirm her worst fears, that I wasn't the perfect firstborn she'd raised. The silence that followed was sharp enough to slice bread. My sister Daisy stared at her plate. My father coughed like maybe he could hide behind the sound. Uncle Rich reached for another roll, because God forbid he skipped carbs even in a crisis. And then Mom said it. Clear, cold, cutting. "You're banned from Christmas, idiot." Just like that. No yelling, no tears. She said it like she was crossing an item off a list. I was the item. I laughed at first. You know that weird, shaky laugh that just bursts out because your body can't process pain yet? That one. But she didn't laugh. No one did. Daisy even looked relieved, like she'd been scared Mom might turn on her next. It wasn't just the words. It was how small she made me feel when she said them. Like I was an embarrassment she'd been forced to hide behind tinsel all these years. Like the woman who taught me to bake sugar cookies had just decided I didn't deserve Christmas sugar or cookies or anything sweet ever again. I looked down at my plate. The green beans were going cold, swimming in butter, the gravy turning into glue. I thought about all the times I decorated that same table, wrapped the same presents, helped her frost her famous peppermint cake. And I realized, sitting there in that too bright dining room, that I was officially uninvited from my own family. She told everyone to keep eating like nothing had happened. And they did. I tried to swallow a bite, but it was like chewing on sand. Dad muttered something about timing and family values. Mom nodded, tight-lipped. Daisy finally found her voice. She said, "Maybe you should have told us privately." I wanted to say, maybe Mom shouldn't be an emotional wrecking ball in public, but I didn't. I just sat there, feeling my heart shrink until it could fit inside a napkin ring. It wasn't that I expected applause or confetti when I said I was pregnant. I just expected not this. Maybe a little shock, a few awkward congratulations, a few whispered, "We'll figure this out." Instead, I got an eviction notice from my own holiday. That night, I packed a small overnight bag. I didn't even take my coat from the hallway. I just walked out. Snowflakes were falling, sticking to my sweater, melting against my cheeks. For a second, I thought maybe Mom would run after me, like in those cheesy Christmas movies. But when I looked back, the door was shut. The wreath glowed, perfect and fake. I drove home in silence. The radio played carols. Silent Night, of course, because the universe has a wicked sense of humor. Every lyric felt like a punchline. I turned it off and whispered to my belly, "Don't worry. I'll make sure you have Christmas. Maybe not this one, but someday." It's funny how quickly home can become a stranger's house, how one sentence can rewrite your entire definition of family. I thought I'd cry all night. I didn't. I just sat there, numb, thinking about all the rules Mom had built our lives around, how appearances mattered more than truth, how every dinner was a stage performance, how every smile had to be rehearsed. And I wondered, for the first time, if maybe she wasn't cruel because she hated me. Maybe she was cruel because she was terrified of what people would say. Still, knowing that didn't make the pain smaller. It just made it heavier, like empathy poured into concrete. By midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Return the family ornaments you borrowed. You won't be needing them." That was the last message I got from her that year. I remember standing in the living room, looking at my tiny fake tree, the one I'd bought on sale from Target, and thinking how small my world suddenly was. Just me, my bump, a few blinking lights, and the echo of her words. "You're banned from Christmas." And for a while I believed her. For a while I believed that being uninvited meant being unworthy. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It has a way of turning into solid ground once you got nothing left to lose. I didn't know it yet, but that night was the beginning of everything. The end of pretending. The start of becoming someone real. The kind of woman who wouldn't just survive. She'd build something out of the pieces they threw away. And maybe, just maybe, one day, they'd see it too. After that dinner, silence became the soundtrack of my life. You'd think being banned from Christmas was dramatic enough, that maybe, once the dust settled, Mom would cool off and send one of her "let's move on" texts. But nope, she doubled down. She always doubles down. At first, it was little things. My name quietly disappeared from the family group chat, the one filled with turkey photos and passive-aggressive recipes. Then came the Facebook posts. "Some people mistake selfishness for bravery," she wrote. No names. She didn't need them. Everyone knew who she meant. Daisy shared the post with a heart emoji. My aunt commented a prayer. It felt like being tried in a courtroom where the judge was also the prosecutor, and the jury was made of cousins who still owed me money. I told myself Mom was just hurt, that she'd come around. She didn't. When I stopped by to grab boxes from the garage, she spoke through the glass like I was selling cable. "I'm protecting my peace," she said. I wanted to ask, from who? "Your pregnant daughter?" But only nodded. She told me to come back after New Year's. I never did. That week, I lost my catering job, the one Mom had bragged about getting me. The owner said my personal situation might send the wrong message. I smiled, thanked him, and left before he could say sorry. My fridge held ketchup, half a lemon, and a very hopeful jar of pickles. That night, Daisy texted, "Mom says it's best if you skip the church bazaar. People will talk," I typed, "they already are." Then deleted it. Church had once been my safe place. Now, the same women who'd called me Sweet Nora patted my arm with pity. "We're praying for you, honey," one whispered. I wanted to say, "Pray for better manners while you're at it." The loneliness crept in like winter through old glass. I stopped checking messages. Every post online, families in matching pajamas, felt like salt. Still, I clung to small things, humming carols while folding laundry, baking one cookie at a time, telling my belly, "We'll build our own traditions." Then, while packing the last box from my old room, I found Mom's phone buzzing under a pile of photo albums. A text from my aunt read, "You did the right thing." She always wanted attention. Mom had replied, "She's just like her." Her. The word hit like a pin to the chest. I scrolled. Fragments of a secret. History repeating. Never told Nora the truth. That night, I lay awake wondering what she'd buried deep enough to turn love into cruelty. I wasn't ready to dig. I only knew I had to leave. That silence, that town, that version of myself that kept apologizing for existing. So, I made a list. Find work somewhere new. Save enough to start over. Leave before Christmas. I cleaned houses, babysat, walked dogs for cash and lasagna. Each dollar felt like a brick between me and the past. But at night, I couldn't stop hearing it. "She's just like her." Who was she? A secret? A ghost? The question stayed with me. And so did a faint, impossible hope that maybe the problem had never been me at all. Then, one rainy Tuesday, hope arrived quietly, wrapped in the blue glow of my laptop. A message from Elena, a woman I'd once worked with, bold and kind. She'd moved back to Dublin, managing a small riverside hotel, and they needed someone for the night shift. "If you need a new start," she wrote, "come. We'll find you a corner of the world where no one knows your story yet." No one knows your story yet. It sounded like both a promise and a warning. I was 7 months pregnant, broke and terrified. But deep down, a voice whispered, "What if running isn't cowardice? What if it's survival?" That night, I opened my grandmother's recipe box. Between yellowed cards for cherry pudding and Thanksgiving pie was a note in her slanted hand. "If life ever tells you there's no place for you at the table, make your own. Invite kindness. Leave one chair open. Someone will come." Beneath it, almost faded, "Not all Christmas gifts come wrapped." I read it again and again until something in me shifted. Then another paper slipped free. My mother's handwriting this time. "You were right, Mom. It's done. I'll be the good girl they need me to be. I won't speak of it again." A ghost, pressed between sugar stains. That night, I pressed my hands to my belly and whispered, "We'll find a home. It might not be perfect, but it'll be ours." The baby kicked once, strong, certain, as if agreeing. The next morning, I called Elena. Her voice was pure sunlight. "Come to Dublin," she said. "It's cold, but the tea's hot, and people here believe in starting over." A week later, I sold my car, packed 2 suitcases and the recipe box, and left, quietly, no goodbyes. As the plane lifted off over snow-covered fields, I whispered, "Goodbye, old Christmas." For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt free. For days, I replayed that message, not because I missed her, though maybe I did, but because I wanted to understand the silence between her words. She hadn't said proud or sorry, just happy, as if she couldn't believe I'd managed it without her. Then Daisy wrote. Her email said, "Mom watches your videos all the time." She's proud, even if she'll never say it. "Maybe it's time you two talked." She added, "Everyone at church saw your interview. They can't stop talking about you." I laughed and cried at once. The same people who once whispered my name like a curse were now treating it like a Christmas miracle. Still, I wasn't ready. Elena's voice echoed in my mind. "You don't have to forgive to move forward, but you do have to decide if you're walking away out of peace or out of fear." That settled it. When my publisher invited me on a small US book tour, I agreed. I wanted Clara to see where I came from, but I also wanted to stand there as the woman I'd become, not the girl who'd been cast out. The signing would be in my hometown library, the same place where I used to hide between aisles, reading cookbooks like they were escape plans. I packed light. 2 dresses, Clara's favorite blanket, a jar of Irish soil, and the recipe box that had started it all. The night before I left, I baked one last batch of cinnamon star bread. The apartment filled with warmth and spice as Clara toddled around with her toy spoon. I knelt beside her and whispered, "Tomorrow, we go where it all began, my love. And this time, we're not guests. We're home." Flying in felt surreal. The streets looked the same. Tidy houses wrapped in Christmas lights, but I wasn't the same girl who had once walked them in shame. At the bookstore, Mrs. Callahan, who'd known me as a teenager, hugged me and said, "We're proud of you, Nora." Her kindness nearly undid me. Inside, the shop glowed with string lights and cinnamon candles. Stacks of band from Christmas and other blessings filled the tables. People smiled, offered kind words, waited patiently for me to sign their books. People who once avoided my eyes now leaned close to say, "You helped me." And then, halfway through my reading, I saw her, my mother, standing at the back of the room, pale and still, clutching her purse like a shield. The air left my lungs. I kept reading. I had to, but my voice softened as I reached the passage about grace. "Forgiveness," I read, "isn't something you give because someone earned it. It's what you choose when you refuse to let bitterness own your life." When I finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat, and then the applause began, soft at first, then swelling like a wave. After the signing, as the crowd thinned, I saw her still standing near the exit. Unsure whether to stay or flee, I walked toward her, each step heavy with years of things unsaid. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, fragile, her confidence replaced by something close to fear. Her lips parted, then trembled. Finally, she whispered, her voice breaking, "You look just like her." She said, "You look just like her?" And in the space between those words and my next breath, I understood. She meant the baby she'd lost and buried in silence, the shadow that had stalked every decision since. And when she slipped an envelope from her bag, my hands shook because some truths arrived like storms and some arrived like paper. Inside were photographs I had never seen. My mother as a teenager with bright, unbroken eyes beside a hospital bed. My grandmother cradling a child who wasn't me. And on the back, in faded ink, softened by years of being almost confessed, the words, "For forgiveness, when it's time." I didn't know whether to hold her or to weep. And then she whispered the sentence that undid the scaffolding of our family, that she had wanted me perfect because she had not been allowed to be human, that control had felt like love and silence, like safety. And the apology broke her open into a sob that wasn't pretty or performative, but low and shaking, the sound of regret finally learning how to speak. And for a moment I didn't see the woman who banished me, but a frightened daughter carrying a weight so heavy she mistook cruelty for strength. I touched her arm and said quietly, "You can stop now. You don't have to hold it anymore." And the bookstore went reverently still. Not gossip, but ceremony, while she pulled a second envelope from her purse and handed it to the manager with trembling resolve, asking that it go to the local paper with a statement that she had lied about her daughter and about herself, and that the truth, all of it, was ready for daylight. And it wasn't spectacle and it wasn't revenge, just truth, standing bare under fluorescent lights and refusing to flinch. That evening, we sat in a small cafe where the cups clinked softly and the sugar packets wore tiny halos of steam, and she told me everything that had been stolen by secrecy: the teenage pregnancy, the pressure, the deal that erased a life and rewrote a mother, each sentence lifting a brick from her chest, until we were both lighter and raw. And I didn't forgive her in a cinematic rush, because forgiveness, I've learned, is not thunder, but thaw. Yet I let her sit across from me without hate, and that was the beginning. When we parted, she said, "I'd like to see Clara someday." And I said, "Maybe at Christmas." And for the first time, the word didn't taste like exile. It tasted like a door. Back in the hotel, my phone filled with notifications because someone had filmed the moment she handed over the photos, and the part where we spoke through tears. And the caption read, "A mother's truth, a daughter's grace." And I lay on the bed feeling exhausted and oddly at peace, because the circle wasn't closing with vengeance. It was closing with light. And if I ever sat at that family table again, I would not be the broken girl who left, but the woman who came home whole, seen, and free. Power, it turns out, doesn't roar like a crowd on its feet. It settles in quietly, in the calm of catching your reflection and recognizing the woman looking back. And after that night, something inside me finally exhaled. The part that begged for my mother's approval loosened its grip and slipped away. And I realized I didn't need "I'm proud of you" or even "I love you" spoken in the old stingy way. I only needed her to see I was fine, not in spite of her, but beyond her. The story traveled, podcasts, newspapers, strangers passing it hand to hand, and people called it the moment a daughter forgave her mother on camera. Though I hadn't choreographed forgiveness, I had simply run out of room for hate, which is maybe what grace looks like when it's tired and still chooses tenderness. Back in Dublin, Second Sunrise overflowed behind the chalkboard that read, "Some doors close, bake windows," and we hired women who needed wages and a witness, single mothers and late-blooming beginners and grandmothers who could braid a loaf blindfolded, and the kitchen filled with laughter and flour and the forgiving chaos that feels like family. And when the book slipped onto a bestseller list, my publisher cried and said, people weren't buying recipes, they were buying hope. And I believed her, because every box we tied with twine felt like a quiet amen. Then New York called with a Christmas Eve telecast for single parents and asked for both of us, which made me laugh first and flinch second, because the idea of sitting beside my mother under lights felt like an emotional tripwire. But Elena tilted her head and said, "Think of the women who haven't found their voices yet." And that was that. Mom and I began the slow choreography of tentative messages, photos of my childhood ornaments cleaned and waiting, questions about Clara's favorite songs, news that my father read my book and cried softly in the evenings like a letter arriving 20 years too late. And I prepared my remarks not as an indictment, but as a map about the difference between letting someone back into your life and letting them live in peace inside your heart. And as Clara, now chattering and bright, shouted, "My mama bakes stars," I decided that if she grew up knowing half the quiet I had to fight for, it would be enough. On the flight, I watched the ocean darken and felt not nerves, but a rooted steadiness, the calm that comes after losing everything once and learning you can begin again. And when we landed, there was a message from my mother that said, "See you soon, my brave girl." And for the first time, the word "my" didn't feel like a claim. It felt like a soft acknowledgement that I didn't belong to her story anymore. I belonged to my own. Christmas Eve arrived gilded and humming, the studio warm with music and fairy lights. And before we walked out, I pinned my mother's brooch because her hands were shaking, the way she once tied my shoelaces before kindergarten. And in that small reversal, I understood that healing is often written in domestic cursive, in gestures that look like nothing and mean everything. She looked at me with wet eyes and whispered, "Thank you for coming home." And I said, "I never really left. I just had to find my way back." And then the stage manager called our names, and the children's choir gave way to applause, and time folded in on itself until all I could feel was the quiet thud of my own heart choosing the light again. The host asked about second sunrise, and I said the truth I'd practiced in the mirror, that the sun keeps returning whether we deserve it or not, and forgiveness is like that too, less a proclamation than a daily practice. And then came the question that hovered over every seat in the room. "Margaret, what was it like watching your daughter tell this story, knowing you were part of the pain she overcame?" My mother hesitated, the cameras a soft electric hush, and then in a voice that cracked once but did not break, she said, "It was like facing a mirror I avoided for decades. I thought control would keep her safe and shame would protect her from judgment. But love doesn't build walls, it builds bridges. And I am grateful she built one back to me." I took her hand, still cold, still shaking, and felt the last hard edge inside me smooth down, not into forgetfulness, but into something sturdier. And as the audience rose, I understood the truest revenge I would ever taste. Not triumph over her, but triumph over the story that tried to keep us both small. The outcast had not only found a table, she had built it, set a chair aside, and left the door open. And when the lights dimmed and the choir began again, I could almost hear my grandmother's faded ink threading through the music. If life says there's no place for you at the table, make your own, invite kindness, leave one chair open, someone will come. And there we were, hands clasped, mother and daughter, not perfect, not finished, but on the bridge together, walking toward morning. The audience went silent. Even the crew had tears in their eyes, and for the first time in years, I reached for my mother's hand, not because she was my mother, but because she was a woman finally telling the truth. When the segment ended, the applause roared, but the sound that stayed with me was her quiet exhale, the sound of someone realizing they didn't have to hide anymore. That Christmas, I walked through her front door for the first time since the night she'd told me I was banned from Christmas. The house looked the same, the wreath, the table, the perfect silver napkin rings, but the air felt different, lighter, as if every window had been opened, and the old ghost had finally slipped out. There was an empty chair next to mine. "For your grandmother," Mom said softly, "and for forgiveness." We sat together, Mom, Dad, Daisy, the neighbors, who'd come to witness what some were already calling the miracle dinner. When Mom spoke, her voice trembled. "I once told my daughter she was banned from Christmas. I thought I was protecting our reputation, but reputation is a poor substitute for love. I hurt her, and all of us. I am sorry." The room fell still, not cold, but sacred. Dad reached across the table and said, "We should have spoken up sooner." "Nora, you broke the cycle." I took their hands and whispered, "We can't undo what happened, but we can decide what happens next." Daisy raised her glass. "To second chances and to cinnamon star bread." Laughter rippled through the room, warm and alive. Clara toddled around the table, stealing pie and hearts in equal measure, and when she handed a cookie to my mother, Mom's hands shook as she whispered, "Thank you for bringing her home." I smiled. She brought me home. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I walked into the kitchen. The old recipe box sat on the counter, lid cracked open. I touched it gently and whispered, "We made it, Grandma." The table's full again, and for the first time, Christmas didn't feel like a performance. It felt like peace, quiet, real, earned. The next morning, I woke to Clara's laughter echoing through the house, light spilling through the windows like forgiveness itself. Mom sat on the couch with her, flipping through old photo albums, and when she looked up, she said, "She has your eyes." I smiled. Maybe she has yours too. And just like that, the bridge between us held. Before I left, Mom pressed an envelope into my hand. "For when you're ready," she said. On the flight home, I opened it. Inside was a check, generous, and a note, "For your foundation. so no woman ever has to choose shame over love again. She'd been listening. That's how the Second Sunrise Fund was born, a small charity that grew into a network helping single mothers through the holidays, sending out boxes each December stamped with our promise: no one is banned from Christmas. The bakery flourished too, becoming a refuge filled with laughter, flour, and forgiveness. People left notes on the walls, stories of second chances and quiet rebirths. And every year, on Christmas Eve, I bake one loaf of cinnamon star bread, leave one chair open, and whisper the same words that started it all. If life tells you there's no place for you at the table, make your own. One afternoon, a woman about my mother's age came into the bakery, clutching my book like it might break. "My daughter hasn't spoken to me in years," she said. "I saw you and your mother on TV. You gave me courage to call her." We hugged, two strangers stitched together by regret and hope. After she left, I locked myself in the back room and cried, realizing my story had become someone else's map back home. Mom kept her promise. We talked often, but gently. Some love grows best with space. Every Christmas, though, we came together, not to fix the past, but to honor that we'd survived it. Clara adored her grandmother, learned to bake pie crusts on her lap, and listened to stories that once would have hurt, but now only made us smile. Progress, I decided, was when the past became something you could tell without bleeding. Daisy joined me at the bakery, handling the charity work while I wrote and baked. We used to joke that we turned our family drama into a family business, except this time it healed people. When the network asked to film the year after forgiveness, I hesitated, then said yes. On camera, I told them, everything's changed, and nothing has. I still bake. I still miss what could have been, but now I build from it. That's the difference between surviving and living. The documentary ended with our Christmas fundraiser. Hundreds of women laughing, singing, eating together. In the corner, Mom held Clara, smiling like she finally understood what love looks like when it isn't afraid. Letters poured in afterward. "You made me believe in family again." That's when I realized healing isn't a finish line. It's a rhythm. Some days strong, some slow, but always moving forward. That Christmas, the bakery glowed with cinnamon and laughter. Clara, head baker, covered in frosting, giggled beside me. When Mom, Dad, and Daisy walked in from the snow, Mom carried a pie wrapped in foil. "Your grandmother's recipe?" she said shyly. "Maybe add it to the menu." I smiled. "Only if you help me bake it next year." She laughed. "Deal." We sat at the big oak table I'd built when I first opened the shop, wide enough for everyone, sturdy enough for every story. This time there were no empty chairs. The world outside was white and still. Inside, warm light and soft carols wrapped around us like forgiveness itself. Mom brushed a crumb from Clara's cheek and whispered, "I can't believe I almost missed this." I squeezed her hand and said, "We can't change the past, but we can keep choosing better, one Christmas at a time." Later, after the bakery closed, I stood alone watching the lights flicker on the tree. On the top branch, Clara had hung a crooked yellow ornament shaped like a rising sun. Above the register hung Grandma's note. "If life ever tells you there's no place for you at the table, make your own. Invite kindness and leave one chair open. Someone will come." She was right. Someone always comes. Sometimes a stranger, sometimes a second chance, and sometimes, if you're lucky, the very person who once turned you away. As I locked the door and stepped out into the snowy street, I looked back through the window. The lights shimmered against the glass, reflecting the sign above the counter. "Second Sunrise, home of hope and warm bread." I smiled to myself and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Mom. We did it." And that's how it ends. Not with fireworks or grand speeches, but with peace, laughter, and the quiet certainty that love, when given a second chance, always finds its way home. Moral: never let someone else's shame define your worth. Love is louder, grace is stronger, and kindness, no matter how small, always leaves the sweetest aftertaste. If this story touched something in you, a like or a comment truly means the world to me. It tells me to keep writing these stories. Stories for every woman who's ever been cast out and found her way home again. Because sometimes the second sunrise is even more beautiful than the first.